the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Holla!
Serving up a fresh and foamy Murdertizer with a preview and a first look at the arrest of the Golden State Killer. Remember, if you've got a tip for Melissa, you need to call her at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. Or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You might just hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host, working as hard as she can to avoid overusing the word micro-penis, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. I'm a 12-year-old boy, and micro penis is hilarious. Although I actually feel like it's too nice. I think it's too nice. What the beautiful and talented producer Mark is referring to is what I think is the best feature that everyone mentions now that it's out about the Golden State Killer. And what this is that he has a tiny cock. And I mean, like real uneventful, let's just say that. So what this Murdertizer is going to be is just a short appetizer before we do a full episode, because there's so much coming out, so much new information. I don't even want to say on a daily basis, on an hourly and sometimes minutely basis. Is minutely a word? I don't want to know if it's not. I'm using it.
It's kind of like that. I wish I had that like breaking news music. You know?
Yes.
I know, but that's just.
I am holding my hand up to one ear.
Oh, perfect.
Like Gary Owens.
Very good.
This just in. So it's not actually just in. It's been in for a couple days. So there will be so much more unfolding as the days go on. So we wanted to devote a full episode to it when we actually had the information and had it correct. There are many true crime podcasts, and I will listen to a couple, and they have just disappointed me greatly over the last 2 days by rushing in to do a podcast because they arrested the alleged Golden State Killer after 42 years of his reign of terror. But the information some of the information they put out was not correct. Some of the podcasts were ridiculous in their excitement to talk about the story. They basically just spent most of the time in this self-congratulatory place of almost taking credit that they solved it. So we don't want to do that. So this Murdertizer is just going to be an appetizer of what's coming up. And I will just be honest that I've been in quite the rabbit hole for the last, now 3 days. On Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, I had a bout of insomnia. What? Shocker. And I happened to look over at my phone, and my beautiful, brilliant friend Carrie, also apparently having a little bout of insomnia, sent me a message and said, they arrested the Golden State Killer, ? And I was like, oh, she's crazy. It must be a non-sleep induced delusion. And then I just did a little digging because I have quite a few people I follow on social media that are dialed right in, and it was true. And it just kept coming, and it is crazy. So for those of you who are not familiar or don't give a shit, which I'm shocked, I got to be honest. Maybe, I don't think that the world revolves around California. You know, I'm from Kentucky. I lived in Ohio for a year, and I've lived in California now for, oh my God, it's coming up on 26 years. That is crazy. But I just would think this would be a case that everyone would know about. Dumb me, apparently not everyone is all, dialed up into the true crime world. I don't understand that either. But this case has been a fascinating one for me for a long time. I, years ago, only heard it referred to as the East Area Rapist. One police officer dubbed it that. As this horrible monster moved around. It then became the original Night Stalker, not Richard Ramirez, who was dubbed the Night Stalker, but they went sort of retrograde, went back and dubbed Joseph James DeAngelo, the original. Well, that's allegedly Joseph James DeAngelo. Allegedly, thank you, legal. Dubbed him the original Night Stalker. So then they combined the names and called it Earons. East Area Rapist, Original Night Stalker, EARONS, which couldn't be a worse name.
I didn't know that's what it meant. I've seen it all over the place.
Oh, no
it was
kidding?
like the name of a website or something.
Oh, my God, I love that. I just thought it meant someone with very large hearing capacity. It was just the dumbest motherfucking name. Earons. It sounds very space age and goofy. So I became even more entranced with this case. Might have been 2013, 2014, when a beautiful, brilliant author, writer, true crime blogger, she had a blog called The True Crime Diary, Michelle McNamara, wrote an article for Los Angeles Magazine, and they accept articles that are typically much smaller, like 8 to 10,000 words, and that's a big profile for them. And I think she submitted an article about the man that she renamed the Golden State Killer, and deservedly so, because, well, first of all, let's just get down to the brass tacks. The Golden State Killer, much more interesting and enticing than Earons. It sounds like one of what's the character in Winnie the Pooh? Eeyore? It sounds like
Eeyore.
Earons. It's just, it's not a good name. It's not catchy. It's not, the Night Stalker.
So Michelle McNamara came up with the name?
Oh, she did.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And brilliantly so, because he moved down the state. His crimes, including rape, ransacking of homes, eventually murder, peeping toms, etc. He's in 10 counties in California. So he started in the East Bay and moved his way down to Orange County. And one of his crimes is actually in South Orange County, almost on the border of San Diego County in Dana Point / Laguna Niguel. I mean, you're right there almost at San Diego. So I had always hoped that he was still alive. I thought he was still alive, but I actually will honestly say I never thought he'd be caught, because it's been so long, and knowing a tiny bit about the psychopathy of a spree serial killer is that they don't change. They don't change. What happens is they get arrested and no one knows who they are. They die. They become infirm and can't do their chosen form of work, killing and raping. They move out of state, move to a different country. And it really does boggle the mind that in 2018, you can't punch a button on a computer and check every motherfucking DNA database and see who did what, where, when, and why, and how. It really bothers me to think that a few people in a few police departments and agencies buckled down and went the extra mile and said, we've got this. Does this look familiar? This guy did this. Do you have anything like this? And I mean, it took decades before someone made the connection between Northern California and Southern California for these goddamn rapes and murders. He had all of that time, and his reign of terror wasn't that long. I mean, it was long, but considering his life, it wasn't that long. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that we're done. I don't know that.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't think his last one was 1986. So what we're talking about is, I'm just going to call him the Golden State Killer because Earons is retarded. And while he started in the East Bay, he moved around a lot, and fuck them. I got to be honest, there was a press conference on Wednesday where the DA from Sacramento was like, it started in Sacramento, it ends in Sacramento. I was like, fuck you, bitch. We all own him. He's a part of all of our lives, you know? It's not all about you and your goddamn agency. And yes, I'm trying to give some credit to Anne Marie Schubert, the DA of Sacramento County, who in 2016 formulated a a task force. So she got the best and the brightest together. I'll give her credit for that. Other than that, she can kiss my lily white fucking ass. I'm not a fan. You might be able to tell. So before I go too far and you're like, what the fuck's she talking about? Let's go back and say that Joseph James DeAngelo, allegedly the Golden State Killer, had a reign of terror from what they did say was 1976 to 1986. It turns out now it's probably 1975 to 1986. And like producer Mark agreed, we're probably not done. But actually he started much earlier than that in the early 70s allegedly as the Visalia ransacker. So the way these things go, if you have a certain psychopathy, you might start, and he quite frankly started late in his life. Typically, if you're going to be a monster of this proportion, you have what's known as the triad. You have, as a young person, you have enuresis, bedwetting, torture of small animals, killing sometimes, something you can catch and kill and feel powerful over, and fire starting. And if you have those three together, hopefully mom or dad or your minister or your principal get you into counseling right away. Now, there's quite a few psychologists who believe that if you get help, you can, tame your baser instincts so they don't grow up to rape and kill. I would like to believe that's true. I spend way too much of my time thinking about nature versus nurture. I don't know that it's true. I would like to believe it's true. But let's just say Joseph James DeAngelo had a little bit of that. But he started late. He was a ransacker, meaning he liked to go into homes, move stuff around, not necessarily steal anything. It's a feeling, I think, of power where you can, like, I'm in your home, you're not here, nanny, nanny, poo, poo, look what I did. He then sort of escalated to peeping Tom, standing outside windows, finding perches to observe people. He then, next step, went into people's homes when they weren't there and began stealing things, did a lot of patient reconnaissance work, months, weeks and months. He would pick a victim and just know every time they had corn in their shit. He was so far into their lives. Next step, breaking in early morning hours, shining a flashlight in your eyes so you can't see, and raping you. And then the final step, when the rapes didn't do enough for him, he would kill. And because he had a fascinating background, also a lot of theories about who he was and why he did what he did and how he did what he did, and all those theories were right. Some profilers felt he was in the military because of the way he tied specific knots around victims' wrists and ankles. Some profilers felt he was in the police force of some security guard or something, because he, even just something as simple as having a police scanner, but it went a little deeper than that. They felt like he was able to elude a law enforcement like a cat, and he really did, because he was also a cop. And some people felt he was in the real estate or development world because of a specific map that was found behind one of the victims' homes. They felt he dropped it, and there were notes written on it that were sort of rambling and odd. And several of the victims were murdered when their houses were for sale. There may have been a realtor lockbox on the door. I mean, they weren't sure what he did, how he did it, why, and we may never know why, but how he did it and who he was becomes much more clear. So Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., the alleged Golden State Killer, alleged, I understand, legal mark, I get it, but there's 100% DNA match. So anyway, we'll just file that.
Allegedly.
Oh, for God's sake. Allegedly 100% DNA match. Christ on a crutch. What do you think he's going to do? Sue me? He has a public defender, the fucking cock. And he has a house. Why don't they sell that fucking house? I'm sorry. Apparently I have some issues. I'm going to work that out.
We will work those out when we do the full episode.
Yes, I promise.
That's a good appetizer, though, to let people know how pissed off you are about
I
that.
am pissed for many, many, many reasons. But allegedly, Joseph James DeAngelo had all of these professions and ironically spent the last 27 years of his pitiful, fucking awful life working as a truck mechanic for a large grocery food distribution house in Northern California called Save Mart. So he just retired. And then he gets to retire to his cell. Sorry. So, yes, this person, and, you know, I try to have compassion because they say people that have been hurt others. And for the most part, that's true. And I think if a lot of people that have been hurt can somehow work through their pain and not blame others, you can go on to live a normal life. I mean, who hasn't had pain in their life? Who hasn't? I'm not saying we've all been, you know, beaten by our mothers with a hose while we had to stand next to the piano and sing How Great Thou Art and She Didn't Let Us Pee. I'm just recalling a scene from Sybil with Sally Field. But anyway, I don't know the history of Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., and at this moment, I just don't care. The level of, allegedly, the level of terror that he imparted in women, men, entire cities, communities, and a large part of the state of California is unacceptable. It's not. It's an awful. It's awful things that he allegedly did, and I am struggling not to use the word micropenis. Until recently, obviously, the law enforcement has not let so much of the information out. But God bless Michelle McNamara. Her long profile in Los Angeles Magazine on the Golden State Killer, that was where she really renamed him and dubbed him that. And in my mind, that's what he's always going to be. I don't give a shit what DA Anne-Marie Schubert says. He's the Golden State Killer. He's not just the East Area rapist, because he sure did move around. That article got her the book deal for her book that came out maybe 2 months ago now, called I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which is an actual statement he whispered to one of his victims. He said, "If you move, I will kill you, you'll be dead, and I'll be gone in the dark." And it's a fantastic title, because it could be, she could have just called it the Golden State Killer book, but she didn't. She named it something meaningful and powerful and real and awful. And her book, if you have any interest in reading it, it is masterful. There are times when it's, you know, scary per se, but it's almost factual, just laying out the facts. I did tend to not read it when I was home alone at night when Mark was gone on business trips. I tend to read it during the light of day. But, you know, I'm a little bit of a scaredy cat, a little bit. But it's so poetic. Her way of describing everything is understandable, relatable as a human being, and poetic. Her book is just, it's masterful. And she, for those of you who aren't aware, she was married to very funny comic Patton Oswalt for about 10 years. And they have a daughter who was about 7 when Michelle passed away. She passed away 2 years ago, almost to the day, like in April of 2016. And she died in her sleep. She was 46. She was obsessed with this story, working on the book. And she took some pill to make her sleep and some pill to wake her up. And the pill that she took to help her go to sleep, and she had an undiagnosed heart condition. All that combined together, she died in her sleep. And she left a wake of grief and pain behind her for those who knew her and love her. But she left a huge wake of grief in anyone who's read anything she's written, because we lost a motherfucking masterful writer. And she had so many more stories in her. I think when you read this book, if you read this book, you'll see sometimes when people write a book, you think they put everything on the page. It's like, I put my everything on the page, and they're kind of done. And you saw her have the ability to put everything on the page, and you knew she had so much more. And I looked so forward to her other books. The two amazing men who helped her finish the book. One was a true crime author, producer, journalist. He works on True Crime Daily and other shows. He actually helped get a murder solved and got credit for it, unlike Michelle. His name is Billy Jensen, and he is fantastic. And she had a researcher named Paul Haynes. And the two of them, along with Patent, went through her notes and went through her computer and compiled this together. And they put together something so seamless and beautiful that you wouldn't know that every word wasn't hers. They're very clear. There are, editor's notes at the beginning of a chapter. This chapter was compiled from Michelle's notes with additions by Billy Jensen, Paul Haynes. It's seamless. If you didn't know that Michelle passed away, you would not know that Michelle passed away. So it's an amazing read, and it's full of details that are fascinating. My favorite is how they now are saying tiny cocked, alleged Golden State Killer, Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., which is kind of funny because you always assume, Italian guys have, big horses, but he's half German. So that might have been it. I don't know.
Is he really half German?
Yes, his mother was German. His father is Italian.
Well, that explains it.
I don't know what his problem is, but apparently he got a little tiny penis. So I can tell you he's wears a size 9 shoe. That makes sense. He got a tiny penis and a tiny foot. He's 5'10", weighed 180 pounds. I think he's probably closer to 250 now. He's not in good shape, I don't think. Blue eyes. I could tell you so much about about him before they caught him, just the physical stuff. And like I said, I really felt like he was alive, but I thought he would never be caught. And say what you will about DNA collection services, paid or unpaid. I think they're going to change the game as far as crime detection. And you can say your privacy is being violated. I don't fucking care. Don't submit your DNA if you think you're going to be a serial killer, you dumb fucker. Because he left a whole lot of DNA all over all of his crime scenes before DNA was a thing. And God bless the brilliant law enforcement who knew somewhere down the line something will come along that will help us. He wore gloves. He wore masks. He left his size 9 shoe impressions in mud outside of windows. He left cigarette butts. He left his tiny little amount of semen that comes out of his tiny little micro pee-pee. And he was a non-secretor. But that means you usually don't leave epithelial cells in your... Anyway, you don't need to know that. What I'm saying is... God bless law enforcement who wanted to get this guy bad enough that they knew it may take a long time. And it did. But they did it. They fucking got him. And for better or worse, what got him was a long-distance family member who entered her DNA into a free site. Again, we can get into the part about your privacy being violated by Ancestry or 23andMe, and it won't be because those sites are pay sites, and law enforcement does not have access to it unless they have a warrant. And from what I've understood, it's not even a warrant. You have to beat the door down of those places before they'll say, "All right, Charles Manson did it." I mean, I think that's an asshole-ish behavior. So GED is a free site. If you want to find out about long-lost family members or where you come from. You can upload, I think it's 54 markers, and they can give you information. And they've had his DNA for a long time, and they have run it all the time through all the sites. What they were literally hoping for is that a family member of his would commit a felony, and they would get a hit off of a distant familial DNA result from a family member that committed a felony. I don't think they had any idea that they would get a hit off of a general population DNA site. And they did. And it happened a while ago, and they had to narrow it down to age, geography, who it could be. They eliminated everyone else from this distant relatives crew and finally narrowed it down, allegedly, to Joseph James DeAngelo. He had retired a few weeks ago, and he was apparently a couch potato. And on Tuesday afternoon, after they had gotten a discarded amount of DNA from a public place, the Hobby Lobby, which makes me deliriously happy, they rolled up in an undercover car while he was mowing his grass. He hardly ever came out of his house. So when he came out, hey, could we have some directions? And they nabbed him. They were told that he had an end game if he was ever confronted by law enforcement. And I think the end game would have been he killed them and himself, because his actions now are pretty dismal. So we may not get the answers that we would get like out of Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, or other killers who, maybe would be good at spilling the beans. Since his arrest, he actually was booked at 2:29 on Wednesday morning, 2:29 a.m., probably about 12 hours after they arrested him. They booked him. And that's when the internet world went on fire. And that's when my friend Carrie messaged me. And that is when I woke up and Billy Jensen was like, hey, there's a big announcement. Sacramento District Attorney's Office is having a press conference at noon on Wednesday. We think we know what it's about. And then it just got deeper and deeper and deeper. And by Wednesday at noon, we knew what it was. Much earlier than that, we knew what it was. And when they announced it, the stories that have come out are sad and yet not sad enough. When they arrested him, he apparently mumbled to himself over and over again in the back seat, "But I've lived a good life. I pushed him out." So when I heard that quote, I thought, okay, motherfucker, are you trying to set up an insanity plea? Because it ain't going to work. You're too smart to plead insanity. You knew what you were doing. Every step of the way, you knew what you were doing. Now he has refused to eat or drink or have any relatives visits. He has an estranged wife and 3 daughters and a granddaughter. 1 daughter and granddaughter live with him in his house 4.5 miles from our sister-in-law in Citrus Heights, where he's lived for over 30 years. So he went back right to the center of where his nightmare began, or where the nightmare he inflicted on the rest of us. But I am fascinated to know what's going to happen, what's coming up. His arraignment was today. It was very short and simple. They wheeled him in a wheelchair. He looked so frail and like he didn't understand. The judge was like, "Do you understand the question?" He said, "Do you have an attorney?" "Yes." "Is your attorney here?" "Yes." "Do you understand what's happening?" "Yes." It was more like, "Yes." He has a very high-pitched voice, if you've heard any of the recordings. Probably because all of everything went to the rest of his body. It, like any sort of power, escaped from his penis and his voice. He's mostly a female. His next court appearance is Monday, May 14th, where I'm hoping he will enter a plea. My guess is going to be he's going to try and say not guilty. But you never know, right? We still have a couple of weeks before that happens. So we will be doing a more lengthy podcast, a full-length podcast maybe a couple of them, because this case is so big and so layered and so deep. I just didn't want to rush and not do the kind of quality podcast that you beautiful tipsters deserve. And I can't thank you enough for listening to this. This is one of the loves of my life, doing this. And you guys are another love of my life. And thank you for being who you are. And more cowbell.
Make sure to call Melissa with any tips you have on this case or any other at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. Or send Melissa an email to jttipsters@gmail.com.